We all fundamentally want connection, don't we? That search for love, for somewhere we feel truly at home, safe. It drives so much. But imagine this scene, psychologically speaking. What if the blueprint for that home, the one drawn way back in your childhood,
Yeah.
what if it was just deeply flawed? What if your first taste of love wasn't nurturing, but maybe tinged with cruelty or absence,
Mhm.
neglect?
That right there sets up this, well, this bitter paradox we see so often. You'd think, wouldn't you, that a really tough, unloving childhood would make you hyper-aware, like super skilled at spotting and avoiding similar pain later on.
Yeah, you'd expect that, like an early warning system.
Exactly. But often the opposite happens. Those early, really unfulfilling bonds, they can actually push the adult to unconsciously seek out and, crucially, tolerate echoes of that same mistreatment.
Wow.
So this deep dive, it's really about exploring that mechanism, this lifelong, almost instinctual pull towards what you might call sad echoes.
A search for sad echoes.
Hmm.
That's a powerful phrase. Haunting, really, because it captures the tragedy of it. You're looking for love to finally feel home.
Mm-hmm.
But if home was originally a place of pain or anxiety or just feeling unseen, then that familiar ache can get mistaken for love itself.
That's the core of it. We need to understand why this happens. How that intense childhood need to just survive shapes the adult mind in ways we don't always recognize.
It's not just about the damage done then.
No, it's also about the skills developed because of the damage. Skills designed for tolerance, for coping, which then become, well, a real liability when you're trying to choose a healthy, loving partner later in life.
Okay, let's dig into that, starting with survival. The price a child pays just to get through. It's huge.
It really is.
When you look at childhood, the question, why put up with terrible treatment, has a stark answer, doesn't it? The child is just completely powerless.
That powerlessness is everything. A child can't just pack a bag and leave. They can't get a job. They depend utterly on caregivers for everything. Food, warmth, any scrap of affection.
But their only real option is
To adapt. They have to adapt. And adapting, when things are really deprived or harsh, it requires this almost psychological genius.
the genius of looking away, you called it.
Precisely. It's a necessary kind of dissociation. The child has to become incredibly skilled at not fully registering how bad things might be.
Why? Because facing it head on is just too much.
It's unbearable.
Yeah.
To fully grasp their vulnerability, the fact that the people they rely on are maybe unsaved or uncaring, that level of terror is simply unsustainable for a child's mind. So they develop ways to compartmentalize, to not notice.
Right, so like if dad is always shouting, the kid doesn't process the fear maybe. They get intensely focused on a cartoon or mapping out every crack in the pavement.
Or climbing a tree in the garden, yeah. Creating a little world inside their head where they feel safe. A little house up there. It's a mental escape hatch.
And it works for subtler things too, like constant criticism or a parent who's just never
Yeah.
really there for them.
Absolutely. If a mother is, say, consistently mocking or totally unreliable or maybe subtly disloyal, the child learns to file that away under normal. It's just how things are.
Like bad weather or too much homework.
Exactly. Unpleasant, maybe, but perceived as an unchangeable fact of life. You can't fight it, so you tune it out. Treat it like background noise.
But it goes deeper than just distraction or tuning out, doesn't it? There's this other layer, a kind of philosophical defense, internalizing the blame.
Yes, and this is critical. For a child's psyche, it's often far, far safer to believe, okay, I must be the problem here, I'm doing something wrong, and that's why they're tough on me. But deep down, they're right.
Safer than the alternative.
Much safer than the alternative, which is facing the terrifying thought, the person who controls my entire world, my survival, is maybe just cruel or chaotic, unjust. That realization is pure chaos for a child.
Wow. So blaming yourself is actually a strategy to maintain some sense of order, some predictability.
Exactly. It's a desperate bid for predictability. If I'm the bad one, then maybe I can change, I can fix myself, and then things will get better. It offers a sliver of control, however illusory.
Versus the sheer terror of my caregiver is random, possibly hostile, and I'm trapped.
Right. The brain prioritizes predictability, even painful predictability, over chaos. And this mechanism, it trains the child to become incredibly generous in their interpretations of people who hurt them.
Compulsively generous was the phrase.
That's it. They become experts at inventing reasons, justifications, for giving explanations for behavior that's actually appalling. anything to protect the image of the caregiver as fundamentally okay.
And the cost of that.
The cost is that the internal warning system, that psychological muscle that should instinctively react to mistreatment and say, hold on, this isn't right, this is harmful, it has to be suppressed. It has to be starved to allow the child to cope.
It atrophies, like
Well,
muscle you never use.
Precisely. It withers away. Because to keep it strong, to use it, would mean facing the unbearable truth. Maybe you spent 18 years living with people who were, let's be blunt, incapable of real love or consistently prioritizing your needs.
And realizing that would shatter your world.
So you lose the ability to accurately gauge what's good for you versus what's bad for you. That's the price of survival, making it through childhood emotionally intact in a way.
And that withered muscle, that's the bridge to the problems in adult relationships.
That's the direct link. You carry that history, that specific way of coping into your adult life, into dating, into partnerships. And because that danger detection muscle is weak,
You're not good at spotting the red flags.
you're incredibly poor at discerning when a partner's behavior crosses the line, when it moves from maybe just normal human flaws into actual selfishness, neglect, or even malevolence.
It's like you're still operating under that old childhood command. Or was it a narcoleptic command not to notice?
Yeah, it's a powerful metaphor. Like you're programmed to just fall asleep at the critical moment when you should be waking up to the reality of how you're being treated, to stay blind to the blows, just like when you were a kid.
Because the patterns feel
Familiar.
painfully familiar. So familiar they don't ring alarm bells. They might even feel on some unconscious level like home, like the
Yeah.
recognizable, if uncomfortable, shape of connection you grew up with.
So things that an outsider would immediately question. You just don't.
You just don't. It simply wouldn't occur to you to question certain fundamental imbalances, certain ways of being treated that someone else would spot in a heartbeat.
Okay, let's make this really concrete. What does this blindness look like day to day in an adult relationship? What are some examples people listening might recognize?
Well, it often shows up as an inability to set really basic boundaries, like maybe your partner consistently breaks promises, big or small, but you never really call them on it because, well, confrontation feels too risky, too destabilizing. Or they always seem to prioritize their friends, their hobbies, work, anything over quality time together. And you feel that pang of neglect, but you tell yourself,
Oh, they're just independent or they need their space. You rationalize it away instead of saying, hey, my needs aren't being met here.
what about things like money?
That's a common one too. Maybe you find you're always the one paying for things, covering shared expenses, making financial sacrifices, and you just don't question the imbalance. It just sort of happens.
And if you do try to bring something up, even gently,
Then you might hit the wall of angry defensiveness. Or maybe passive aggression, or they turn it around on you somehow. Any tactic, really, that shuts down the conversation and makes you retreat.
in those tactics, the deflection, the blame shifting, the emotional withdrawal,
Those are the adult versions, the echoes of the kind of emotional manipulation or hostility you learned to just absorb and ignore decades ago. It triggers that old pattern of smoothing things over, of backing down.
and instead of thinking, wait, this person doesn't seem very concerned about my feelings or well-being, we jump back into that childhood coping mode, that generosity thing.
Yes, the compensatory generosity. We fall right into what we call the elaborate explanation trap.
Okay, unpack that. The elaborate explanation trap.
It's essentially extreme rationalization. You've invested so much time, hope, love into this relationship, and now you're faced with behavior that doesn't fit the narrative you want to believe. The dissonance is painful.
So you have to make it make sense.
You have to. So you invent these complex, often quite sympathetic explanations for why they act the way they do. You basically write a script for their bad behavior.
Okay, they're snapping at me, but they're just really stressed at work right now.
Or, yeah, they can be abrasive, but that's just because they're so brilliant and sensitive, like an artist.
Or the really big one.
Hmm.
They act this way. Fierce, difficult, maybe even cruel sometimes, but it's because they had a tough childhood. They have their own traumas.
Exactly. And that one is particularly potent because it flips the script. Suddenly, you need to be the understanding, endlessly patient one, offering sympathy and enduring their current unkindness out of compassion for their past pain.
Wow. So you become the caregiver to their wounded inner child, even while they're hurting you.
Precisely. And all these elaborate stories serve one primary purpose: to avoid the simple, humble, but devastating truth.
Which is,
I might have fallen in with someone who is fundamentally self-absorbed, an unconcerned egoist.
accepting that simple truth feels too catastrophic.
It can feel catastrophic because it means admitting the pattern is repeating. It means acknowledging that maybe you've spent months or years recreating aspects of that original pain, and that maybe you need to leave. The elaborate explanation shields you from having to face that.
Okay. So this is where the pivot needs to happen. For anyone listening who feels these echoes, who recognizes these patterns, the first step seems crucial. It's about reframing the tolerance itself.
Absolutely. You have to stop beating yourself up about it. Stop adding another layer of disloyalty to yourself by feeling ashamed of this tolerance.
Because that shame just keeps you stuck.
It's like the final lock on the prison door. You need to understand, really understand, that this tolerance isn't some inherent character flaw. It's not weakness. It was a survival strategy.
Yeah, strategy that worked back then.
It worked brilliantly back then. It served a vital, sensible, life-saving purpose. It got you through an impossible situation. But the same strategy that saved you then,
Is wrecking your life now.
it's actively undermining your happiness and well-being now. So the task isn't to condemn the child who needed that strategy. It's to gently, consciously set it aside now that it's no longer serving you.
Okay. So how do you actually do that? How do you wake up from that narcoleptic command when your own internal alarm system, that muscle, is, well, dormant?
The key often lies in finding an external perspective, shifting your viewpoint. You need to try and see your situation, your choices, your partner's actions, the dynamic between you as if it were happening to someone else.
Someone you care about.
Exactly, someone you care about deeply. Ask yourself this crucial question. If my best friend or my sibling or someone I love came to me and described this exact situation, what would I advise them to do?
Oh. Taking yourself out of the emotional equation for a moment.
Precisely. Stepping outside that immediate emotional pull, that ingrained compulsion to be generous and make excuses for the person who's hurting you, that's often the only way to see the evidence clearly, without the fog of your own history.
And what does that clarity usually reveal?
It grants this momentary but potentially revolutionary liberation. You suddenly see the treatment not through the lens of your partner's supposed complexity or as some test of your loyalty, which is how you might have framed your parents' difficult behavior,
Right.
but as something much simpler, much more humble. Just
Okay.
evidence, plain and simple evidence that says, this isn't okay. This isn't good for me. I need to get away.
The complex story collapses into a very straightforward need for self-preservation.
It does. But seeing it, having that moment of clarity, that's just the start. It's incredibly important, but it's not the whole journey.
Because the underlying issue is still there.
The fundamental task remains. You have to acknowledge, okay, that muscle most people use instinctively to detect and eject emotional poison, to recognize toxicity and protect themselves. Mine has withered because of my specific history.
So the work is actually rebuilding that muscle.
Yes, it's about dedicating yourself consciously to strengthening that capacity, to learning how to trust your gut again, how to set boundaries, how to recognize unhealthy patterns before you get deeply entangled. It's about actively reversing the direction of your psychological fate.
Because that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Not just ending one bad relationship, but changing the underlying pattern.
Exactly. The core takeaway is this. Your early suffering, the wounds from your past, they should not condemn you to a future filled with more pain. You are not destined to repeat these cycles forever.
The goal is to break free from seeking those sad echoes in the first place, to recalibrate what home feels like.
And let's end with a thought that might feel perhaps radical, but also deeply empowering, something for you to really sit with.
Okay.
Precisely because of that unique history, because you know the landscape of that suffering so intimately, you actually gain a particularly powerful, almost original claim on the opposite.
The opposite being.
Deep sources of genuine kindness, real tenderness, authentic calm, because you know, perhaps better than anyone, what their absence feels like. Your capacity to truly appreciate and value their presence is potentially profound.
That's a really beautiful way to reframe it. The suffering doesn't just define the wound, it defines the depth of the healing you deserve and the richness of the peace you can now recognize.
It absolutely can. So the exploration for you listening now might be this. Knowing I have this unique, hard-won claim to calm, to tenderness, to kindness. How do I start actively, intentionally claiming that right now? Without apology, without compromise. How do I build that future?